Today's edition of Mac Voices is supported by MacVoices Magazine, our free Flipboard magazine that brings you some of the best Mac, iPhone, and iPad productivity tips on the web. High in signal, low in noise, just like Mac Voices, MacVoices Magazine includes information on how you can get more out of your Apple technology. Subscribe at macvoices.com/magazine or search for Mac Voices Magazine on Flipboard. Welcome to Mac Voices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we're continuing our coverage of the newly updated operating systems coming from Apple. This time, we're going to talk about High Sierra, something that will probably affect all of us, obviously, as Mac users. This is also a Take Control author interview, and this is an early access Take Control book author interview with Scholle McFarland. Scholle, welcome. It's great to have you.
Hi. Great to be here.
Yes, Scholle is around the campfire tonight. And if I can't do
we have some technical difficulties at my house.
Yeah, well,
not to mention a chewed headset. So,
yeah, well,
and a campfire light.
Yeah, well,
there we go.
That's good. It feels kind of homey, Scholle. I kind of like it.
Scholle's fireside chat.
Yeah,
that's what we're doing tonight.
Yeah, about High Sierra. Perfect. And of course, that is the book, Take Control of High Sierra, something we will all hopefully be doing pretty quickly. And so I thought, we talked to Josh about iOS 11. We talked to Joe about upgrading to High Sierra, but you're the one we're going to look to start getting to learn this new operating system and make the most of it. And the first thing I have to ask you about, of course, is the file system, because that's something that is going to be high on everybody's mind. Should they, shouldn't they, can they, can't they? So I'll let you start with there. How do you address the file system?
Well, I think the best way to start is with what does this update feel like? And in the past few updates, we've had a lot of really big features. I mean, starting with Yosemite, which was a huge revamping of the whole macOS. We have seen a lot of cool new features. There's been a lot of flashy stuff, a lot of new connections between our devices. So this, I think, is the first update we've had in a while that you can feel more than you can see. And part of that is that Apple did all these technical updates in the background, one of them being the new file system. And I think the main idea with these is they're trying to make the Mac experience faster, make everything, the little things that just make you feel like you have a Mac that's working well, like the startup time or like how long does it take to duplicate a file, little things that you do all day long, that when they take that extra few seconds or minutes are really aggravating. Actually, when I was doing this beta for a while, there was a significant lag with iCloud. So I have my desktop in iCloud, and I would save a photo, and I would have to wait for it to appear on my desktop. And I was like, oh my God, remember when that used to be normal? Everything used to take a long time. So the file system is one part of this overall speed increases and efficiency increases that we're seeing. So what the deal with the file system is it's our first new file system since 1998. So we've had the same Apple file system for a really long time. And this one they announced last year, and they've been rolling it out across all of the Apple devices. And now it's finally going to come to the Mac. The thing that I didn't realize at first was that we've been told this is really made to optimize solid state drives. So like the MacBooks have these, pretty much all of our devices have them. But our iMacs we've had the Fusion drive, which is a combination of our old type of hard drive and the new solid state drives. But it's only now that we're starting to see Macs that are completely based on solid state drives. So the surprise to me was it doesn't appear like, at least at this point in the beta cycle, that all hard drives are converted to the new file system. From what Joe Kissel and I could tell, actually it's only solid state drives that are automatically changed. And that might end up being different when we finally get the Gold Master, which we're almost there. It's supposed to have been released today, but I can't get it yet. So it's actually not something that everybody's going to see right away, depending on the age of your Mac. But if you do have a solid state drive, a lot of the purpose of this new file system is to speed up those little things, as well as to give us some new crash protections and some new security from this new file system. So it's a big deal, but not everybody's going to feel it right away, that part of it.
I want to take us off script for just a second because you're one of the first people. No, that's not true, but you're one of the very few people I've heard say that they keep their files, their documents folder in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how has that worked out for you? Because I think that's another concern that people have now with Sierra and moving to High Sierra is using that option. Do you find it reliable? Do you find it convenient? Do you find any problems with it?
Well, I guess it was probably 2014, 2013. I had a major hard drive crash and I lost a lot of files. My backup also had failed. Everything failed. And after that, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Doing backup over the internet was not as fast then, So the compromise I did was I started putting everything in Dropbox. And so I have been a stalwart Dropbox user since then. And that is actually where most of my stuff is. All my files, all the take control files, we do all of that in Dropbox. So the idea of having my desktop in the cloud was not strange to me when that rolled out in the last version of the macOS. So it can be convenient. I don't have a laptop and a desktop. I do all my work at a desktop or I'm on an iOS device. So Dropbox has been the most convenient for me because I really, up to this point, that was the easiest way to see everything everywhere, unless you were using an Apple, unless you were using Pages or one of the iWork apps,
right?
Which I don't really use those. I use Google for most everything. And for Take Control, we use Nicest Writer. So I don't have all my stuff on iCloud. I have it all in Dropbox, but I find it convenient to have things in iCloud, especially when I'm doing testing, because I have a separate test Mac. And it means that, I can take a screenshot. Previously, what I did is I'd take a screenshot and have it automatically go into Dropbox. Well, now if I'm on a computer, say I'm in a weird view or something, or I'm in a different user account, I don't have to. It makes it simpler for me if I can just put it on the desktop or put it in some iCloud place and then go to the other user account and be able to get it out of that. So I find it to be fine. Now, if you have like a lot of stuff that you keep on your desktop or in your documents folder, I know some of my other Take Control compadres have concerns if they're moving a lot of big files around regularly, but I don't. I just have simple screenshots usually and simple documents. And like I said, most of my stuff I do in Google Docs anyway. So it's not even hitting I barely use my storage on my Mac anymore. It's all in the cloud. So I've completely drunk the Kool-Aid. I'm in there. All the way in the cloud.
Well, and one thing that you have to remember, I guess, is that your files really are still on your Mac. It's just that they're syncing to the cloud.
Yeah.
So if you go to launch a file, it's on your Mac. And if you are on an airplane and you go to launch that file, it's still on your Mac. It's just when you get to the hotel or home or wherever you're going to or from, that you get connectivity back. That's when things sync. But exactly like Dropbox, same
it's just like
same
Dropbox.
Situation. So yeah. But
and like I said, like I could see it a little more during this beta cycle. I could see that lag. Like if Dropbox had been like this all that time, I wouldn't have ever used it because it's so irritating. Right. But for the most part, I find iCloud pretty seamless. I have a good connection, and usually it is invisible that it's moving between places.
Right. All right, we need to get back to High Sierra, but I couldn't let that comment go because I was really anxious to talk to somebody that uses it day in and day out. So we've talked about the file system and what it's supposed to do for us. What about just the overall interface changes, if there are any? Is there anything that people are going to fire up High Sierra for the first time and say, where did that go, or what's that?
Where did that go? Well, I will say that there is something that people might wonder, where did it go? And it's not actually in High Sierra. It's the new iTunes update that just happened. But I think people are going to think that it's High Sierra because it's happening so close to when High Sierra is launching. So I don't know if you guys have talked about this on the show yet, but the new iTunes takes away all the iOS app part that's been sort of shoehorned into iTunes. So in the past, you used to be able to go to iTunes and sync up, and do some of your syncing for your iPhone or your iPad through iTunes, including old apps that you'd bought. You could re-download them. Now you can't do anything about iOS apps at all in iTunes anymore. That you have to do all on your iOS devices. So that, I think, is going to be something somebody is not going to think about it. It never really made all that much sense, really, to have the apps in there. I think it was always awkward. But if you've gotten used to that, that might be a surprise when remember what I say right now, when in 2 months you're trying to get something that you had up before and you can't find it through iTunes. Other than that, the big new features in High Sierra are mostly limited to a few apps. And then some other things that not everybody uses, but are really convenient if you do use. So the biggest upgrades come in photos. And that is actually, there's so many updates there that we have an entirely separate book about that. So my colleague, Jason Snell, his book will come out in a little bit, and he'll go into all that detail. So that's really, I'd say, the biggest thing that happened. But there's some other everyday apps that get updates that are so convenient. I think people are going to really like them. And the biggest one is Safari. And probably the most beloved of the new Safari features are the autoplay blocking. So autoplay videos, the bane of the web. A couple of versions back, we got the ability to mute audio, errant audio that started. Safari made it easier to see what was playing in your tabs and then click that and stop the noise. This goes one step further in that nothing autoplays to begin with. It's all blocked. So that's pretty awesome. And then the next thing is a feature that prevents advertisers from tracking you across sites. So I think we've all probably experienced this. My personal example is I go to Zappos to look at some Merrill jungle mocks, and then suddenly later I'm on Facebook and those exact shoes are advertised for me, and you're like, oh, what's happening?
Yeah.
So advertisers track you across sites. That's now blocked by Safari. So that's kind of nice if you find that sort of weird and annoying that advertisers are doing that. The next thing about Safari, I think, is really, really, truly convenient. And that's that you can now set customized settings for different sites. So that means if you have a favorite news site you go to, but the type is always too small, it's hard for you to see, you can set a zoom level for that site. Or say the same site, you're like, not only do I want the text to be bigger, but there's so many ads, I can't see anything. You can set Safari Reader as your default view. And Reader is the simplified view that Safari has offered for a long time now, that strips out everything moving, everything that's an advertisement, and makes it as if it's really like a one-page article. If it's an article that goes over multiple pages, it gets it all in one place. So now you can just have that as your default. But you can also change it site to site. So that's one website, but maybe on another website, you need the text to be smaller. You can make these adjustments site by site. And it goes across a few different things. You can set Reader, so whether or not you see the simplified view or not. You can set content blockers, although I will say content blockers block the advertisements. Reader actually is a pretty effective way to do that without having to go find a content blocker and download it. You can stop or leave autoplay. Say you love the autoplaying videos on a certain site. Well, you can turn them back on. Your page zoom, whether or not the site can access your microphone or your camera, whether it can access your location, and also notifications. So I hate it when sites want to notify me about stuff, so I always turn that off. but maybe there's a particular news site that you love it. So you can see everything in one place really easily. And all this is in a new website's pane. So it's very convenient. And really, I think a lot of people are going to love being able to do that. You don't have to futz around with everything every single time.
It feels like this kind of plays into some of Apple's privacy and security focuses. That, you know, I mean, it's too bad that you in the operating system you have to build in all these, I don't know if protection is the right word, but I guess these tools to help you stay private and uninterrupted. Because it does seem like, man, everybody is shouting at you, and everybody wants your attention. You know, whether you open your email or whether you open a web page, everybody, like you say, they seem to think they're the most important site in the world. and I guess, you know, if you think they are, then that's fine. But not every site. I mean, and that's the way it's turning into.
And now you can pick it. Like, you can say, I know that this site depends on advertising to keep the lights on, so I won't block it with this one. But this other one, like, stop the madness, and you can turn it off for that. So it gives you that flexibility that before it's been really complicated to make that happen, or has required you setting your settings every time, which is a lot of work. It wastes a lot of time. So that one's really nice.
And I can't figure out, shall we, whether it's an arms race. That, you know, that we get better blockers, and so they find better ways to get past the blockers. At some point, I'd love to think that the marketers will just say, "Hey, we need to kind of scale back to a tasteful level," and then and people will react positively to it. But instead, they just push, and you know, that's I mean. Well, a website that you and I both know that you used to be associated with is notorious for, you know, for
autoplaying videos.
Yeah, and it's like
hated by readers and editors alike.
I know. I mean, and that's what blows me away is isn't anybody listening? You know, that how you're ridiculed across the web, and yet you continue to do it. You know?
Well, it's tricky because the thing is that we need to pay for things that we value. And I think the web has taught everyone that everything is free, but it's not free. And so that is part of the competing interests. Like, if you do appreciate content of a certain type, you either pay for it or you get knocked over the head with advertisements. So I think it is kind of an arms race, and I don't know where it'll end up, but Apple has taken sides, I guess we could say, and they're on the user's side.
Well, if they don't take sides, the users are going to go out and, you know, pick up other alliances because
it's going to tack stuff onto their browser and try to rig up something. So
you've spent a lot of time, obviously, with High Sierra. Are there any gotchas, any things that, you know, I probably should be wary of, or just painfully aware of when I fire it up for the first time?
You know, I don't think so. This is a really sophisticated update, and part of it not having as many really crazy new features, like, for instance, rolling out the desktop and documents being on iCloud, that was pretty risky. Like, there are a lot of ways that could not work. We don't have a lot of that this time. I mean, we could see problems with the technical aspects that we don't know about yet because we don't have millions of people using the operating system. But in terms of the features, I'd say they're all really quite solid. I didn't really have, I mean, the only problems I've had so far is just features that aren't yet implemented. So even in our early access version of the book, there are things that were advertised that aren't there yet. So, this is a strange one. For instance, Sierra has new voices as one of its new features. So the voices are more natural. They sound less like a computer like that. They flow and they're natural. And it's really great, actually, when Siri tells jokes. It's quite funny because there's inflection in the voice. But so right now, only the female voices are updated and none of the male. So, I mean, there's just strange things like that. But I assume that when I finally can download the Gold Master today, all of that will be fixed. But that's it. Like, that's the level. Other than that, there's nothing that I would say really looks like it was risky or, you know, might really catch people up or might just not work for people. Like Handoff, for instance, when that started, it still can be confusing. Like, it either works magically, like so much of Apple's technology does, or it does not work and you cannot figure out why. So we don't have anything that takes that big of a leap this time, but I think people will be tripped up by.
I will ask about handoff. Has it become, in understanding that you haven't even had the Golden Master, but you've had a number of betas, is it a little more reliable, do you think?
Well, so far it seems like it. The only really new handoff-like feature this time is with Universal Clipboard. So in Sierra, we got the ability to copy something from an iOS device onto the Mac and vice versa, which is really cool and quite convenient, especially if you're writing a book about High Sierra. It's really very handy to just copy and paste.
The Scholle McFarland feature. That's right.
It's Scholle's feature.
Yeah.
But this time they take it one step more, and you can copy and paste from Mac to Mac. So that's one of our connectivity features that has kind of taken the next step. Another connectivity feature that is actually not implemented is all your message history is going to be in iCloud. That was in an earlier beta, and then it disappeared. So I assume it's still going to be there. But that's one of them. And there's another thing, which is actually, this is something that people might interpret incorrectly and then feel like something's wrong. I know that happened to me and the person I was doing testing with, is now you can share a file with people through iCloud. So basically, if you have something that you want multiple people to work on, you can invite them to it. So my first interpretation was of that was like, oh, well, we should be able to work at the same time. I was thinking like Google Docs. So my tech editor and I tried to do that. And that is not what it is for. We had all sorts of crazy stuff happen. We were working in a text edit document, and you would get a syncing message and then everything would vanish. It is not for that. But I've saved you the trouble of thinking that it was like Google Docs. It's not. It's like when you're on Dropbox, if you use Dropbox, when you can send a link to someone of a file and then they can get it directly from Dropbox. It's kind of like that. You have a file, it's in iCloud, you both have access to the same file. So if you're working on it, not at the same time, but one by one, you don't have to keep emailing versions back and forth. That's the trouble it is saving you. So it's really handy. Of course, lots of the iWork apps already have simultaneous editing in them, so it's not so important for an iWork app. But if you're doing something with, a kind of app that does not have simultaneous editing, so many of them do now, you have an easy way to share it with someone and not have to worry about versioning. So that's one of the connectivity features that was a little confusing for me at the beginning, but then we realized what the intent was. And it's pretty handy.
Circle back for a second to Siri. I know we said it sounds better and more natural. Any significant performance changes other than just a better sounding voice that you know of?
So Apple has its new device coming out. It's kind of answer to Alexa and the personal assistant devices. And the main use for that is being able to access Apple Music. So not surprisingly, in Siri, there are a lot of Apple Music features now. So the part of this that's working really well right now is you can ask Siri to create a playlist for you that fits your mood. So you can say, Siri, play me some happy songs, or Siri, play me some breakup songs, anything like that. Play me something mellow. And it will go and select you a playlist and then start playing it. And that's pretty cool. So you can see that would be handy with the HomePod to be able to do that. What it's supposed to be able to do, but it has not been able to do yet, is also answer music trivia. So, Siri is an amazing way to settle arguments around the table about, whatever trivia you are interested in. So they've tried to make it more specifically be able to answer questions about the song you might be listening to. So who's the drummer, or when was this made? That has not been working yet. So I'm hoping that in this update that will be fully implemented. So that's the reason. That's really the main new features for Siri are around music. But I have to say, every time I work on the chapter about Siri, I am reminded how fun Siri is and how pleasant it is to use. I think my favorite thing, every time I want to have I have a sidebar about like what are the things you can ask Siri that have funny answers. And every time there are more, you can ask it, is Jon Snow dead? Like it's something topical every time, to Game of Thrones. Or what's one of them? You can say, I see a... Oh my God, it's from Bohemian Rhapsody. It will completely quote Bohemian Rhapsody to you. If you say, I see a little silhouette of a mano. There's so many weird things. And I just appreciate that, for instance, if you say, Siri, tell me a pickup line, if you keep asking it, it has like 10 or 15 varieties. There's so many answers. It's really quite funny. So not exact. That part of Siri is not actually a productivity boost, I wouldn't say, but it is funny, and you can appreciate how much time was put into it. And it's fun. Like my kids love just asking Siri questions over and over again. So Siri is a fun feature that can also be useful, I will say. I wrote recently a book about calendar and reminders, and one of the easiest ways to set reminders, for instance, is using Siri. So it does have uses too. But it's a fun part of the Mac. It's nice that they take the time to make the Mac fun.
I love the fact that we're talking about Siri through the lens of the Mac.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And not just iOS or the Apple Watch or whatever. Because it took me a little while to sort of remember that Siri is on my Mac. Mm-hmm. And of course, in an office environment, okay, that may not be the best place and time to use Siri. But when you're home alone, or when there's nobody around, it mm-hmm. absolutely is a productivity boost.
Well, but funny you say that, Chuck. There's a feature for that this time. That's actually another new Siri feature. Thank you for reminding me.
Okay.
So this was actually not made for people who are embarrassed to talk to Siri. It wasn't made for that purpose. I think it was really made for people who have a disability that limits their ability to speak, who are using either the keyboard or a pointer device. But Siri now lets you type to it. So say you're like this and you have your headphones in at work and you want to ask a question that is more easily answered by Siri, you can actually just type in your question. It's a setting that you can turn off and on. It's not easy to turn off and on, but I said to Joe Kissel, Joe, there has to be a way to automate this. And he actually wrote 2 scripts that are in the book that you can click them to turn it on or off. So if you're at your office and you want to ask something like, what planes are flying overhead right now? Or do I need an umbrella? Anything like that. Any of the many things that Siri can help you with, you can actually now set it when you're at work so that you can type to it and then it will talk to you through your headphones. So that's actually pretty cool.
I did not know about that. That is cool. Yeah. Where do you type to? What's the process of doing that?
Well, let's take a look, shall we? It's in the preference pane. So you go to Siri Preferences. There's also a new little icon for Siri. And there's a preference, and it's just enable Ask Siri. Oh, no, that's not the one. Oh, no, I'm saying the wrong thing. Edit this part out, Chuck. I've forgotten where it is. Well, see, it's so inconvenient to find that you need the little scripts. That's why I don't remember it anymore. Yeah. You need the little scripts for it because then you just click it on and off.
Well, what I was asking is, mm-hmm. If I'm working in Pages, I obviously can't type my question into Pages or it becomes part of the document. So do I invoke Siri with the button?
Yes. Okay. Yes, you have to invoke Siri, but then instead of the little thing that you usually see with the pulsing line, there's actually a text field, and it says type to Siri. So that's the name of the feature, is type to Siri.
Okay, that is nice, and it's nice that somebody recognized that you are using your Mac, not most likely, but quite probably in an environment that it's not convenient necessarily to always talk to her or him.
And now I'm remembering why I couldn't just find it then. It wasn't actually made for people in an office environment. It was really made as an accessibility feature. So it is under the accessibility preferences, but the benefit is it actually is really convenient for something other than just the accessibility purpose. So I think actually a lot of people will find that convenient. And another reason is High Sierra is the tipping point, I think, between the usefulness of Spotlight versus the usefulness of Siri. there was a time in Yosemite where there was a lot of effort put into Spotlight to make it so that it acted kind of like Siri does, where you could type a natural language question. But I would say we reached the point with this upgrade that most of the time Spotlight is not the most convenient way to do things. It's not even the most convenient way to open a file. It is the most convenient way, I would say, to open an app if you don't use another app launcher, because all you have to do is invoke Spotlight and then just tap a couple of letters. But
Right.
if you're actually looking for a file like open the spreadsheet from 2 Mondays ago, something like that, it gets to the point with Spotlight where it really is hard to craft your question. It's not always, natural language doesn't always work. So sometimes, say you want to know what the Apple stock price is, you can't ask it, what is the Apple stock price? I mean, isn't that natural language? You can't do that. You have to actually type the ticker, and that's the only way you can get that information from Spotlight. Whereas with Siri, you just ask and it tells you. So I think, especially now that there is this text to Siri feature, although, again, I don't think this was Apple's purpose, I think now for a lot of people, for most of the time, Siri is going to be the more convenient way if you want to do things using natural language. And Spotlight, I think, is kind of receding in its usefulness. Part of that's because I don't think it's gotten as much love as Siri has. So maybe Apple will embrace it once again. But I found in past versions of the book, we have a little sidebars that say, when should you use Siri? When should you use Spotlight? Like, what are they most convenient for? For instance, if you want to search for a file and you have no Wi-Fi, if you have no internet connectivity, you can't use Siri. Like, Siri has to have the internet. So then in that case, Spotlight can search your hard drive without the internet. But those circumstances are getting narrower and narrower. And Siri is getting more and more to be the thing I think most people will turn to first.
That's another case, I think, of Apple continuing to try to make this for the non-geeks.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Spotlight can do an amazing number of things, but you have to do the Boolean queries, and you have to kind of understand what to pull down and what to type in. And you're right, it's hardly natural language.
Well, I mean, that was its whole purpose, was to get us away from the kind of Finder search that had us setting pop-ups and needing to know all this, having to set conditions, which is so unnatural for anybody who hasn't specifically learned how to do it. And it still is better, I would say, in a lot of circumstances. But, most people talk. Like, that's what everybody does all day long. So they know how to ask a question as long as, and this is part of Siri too, like Siri understands more all the weird ways that we may phrase our questions too. So it's becoming more and more invisible, the process. And as Siri becomes a main way to interface with different types of Apple devices, like the Apple Watch, I mean, that is really your main way to connect to your watch, is to talk to it. I mean, there's only so much you can do, tapping and pushing things. Mm-hmm. I think the more that they realize people truly don't have much of a backup in the way of tapping or clicking stuff, the better and better they have to make Siri. And then it makes it better and better for the Mac, where you do have other options.
Yeah, I've had, just in the last couple of weeks, I've had different experiences where, to your point, I wanted to set a reminder. Okay, well, yeah. I could go in and put it in the reminders app and all that. Mm-hmm. Or I could just lift my watch or pull out my phone and say, mm-hmm. Hey, well, I'm going to be careful here because I don't want to set an alarm here. But, hey, you, set an alarm for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And,
it's super convenient.
And when when that first moment when you catch yourself realizing it's easier to do that than mm-hmm. type, that's sort of a transformative moment. At least it was for me, because now, first of all, I realize it's easier. Second, I've been trained to use it, and mm-hmm. it's different. It's different. And I don't mean to overplay it, because maybe people have had that experience right up at this point. But tonight on the way home, driving home, mm-hmm. I'm dictating like 4 reminders of things I wanted to get done tonight.
Remind me to call Scholle. That's what you were saying.
No, but remind me, at the specific time to
Yeah.
get on Skype with Shali.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it really is. If you're not using it, folks, now's a
Please
great
do
time.
it.
Yeah, now's a great time.
It's one of the, I mean, the iPhone is such an amazing piece of technology and probably the most transformative technology I have had in my life. But that moment when I realized that I could really offload my brain to it so easily was so great. And now that I realize I can do the same sorts of things with my Mac, it just, they're really doing a great job of starting to make all the devices feel like they're one device. They're one aspect of the same thing. And it's amazing. It really is. And it's exciting and fun to use technology that has been worked on so carefully and that you feel like it doesn't always work perfectly, but it often works perfectly. And that is so much more than we can say, or in the past that we've been able to say. I think we've really come to a new level of expecting things to work and them almost always really even surpassing how we thought that they would do.
You make an interesting point, and I haven't heard anyone express it quite that way, that these are all parts of a greater whole. And again, that may seem very obvious, but I don't think that we often think about it that way. You tend to think of, okay, this is my watch, this is my phone, this is my Mac. And yeah, you're right. I mean, Siri now is pretty much everywhere. When HomePod comes and the new Apple TV comes, it may be even more so.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's absolutely very interesting to see just how it's evolved. And I'm afraid so many people don't appreciate it fully.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've had a bunch of things here with High Sierra. Anything else that you think is particularly noteworthy or that was a favorite of yours? Because we really didn't touch on this, shall we? But High Sierra is an iteration on Sierra. It's bug fixes, a few little tweaks, no massive new features. But that said, Apple always drops something in. How about your favorites?
I would say there's a lot of little cool things. For instance, you can take live photos of FaceTime chats, so you can catch a little sliver of your FaceTime chat that moves. That's fun. It's a fun thing. There's stuff like that. But one that wasn't, I think, really played up as convenient as I have found it is the changes to family sharing. So family sharing has been around for a while. And basically the idea is you can share purchased media with your family members without having to all use the same Apple ID. And it's a great feature. I use it for my family, but there definitely I probably wouldn't have set it up. I don't know if I would have set it up if I hadn't had to for a book, because that's the type of thing where stuff can go wrong. It's one of those things. But it is so great to be able to have my kids, like, they can't just buy. It's not like they can buy stuff or they can't buy stuff. They ask me whether they can buy stuff. So it's routed through me. There's all sorts of convenient parts of it, like it creates a family calendar automatically. It creates a family reminders list automatically. It does all this stuff like that. It lets us share an Apple Music subscription amongst all of us. It's really nice. But there's been a lot of features that have been kind of hard to find. They're sort of like buried in preference panes, and you don't even know all the things it can do because it's kind of hard to find it. And that was one of the sort of understated features of this update, is that the family sharing interfaces has really been revamped. There's now a new Manage Family pane where you can see not only like, here are all the members, here are their ages or their status, like that's a parent or that's a kid. And you can, with an easy list, you can turn off and on who can see you. Say you're going to get a surprise puppy and you don't want anybody to be tracking your location. You can easily turn it off and on without having to dig through stuff. And that is really convenient. It's super convenient. So from there, you can see all the different options. And for the first time, you can share an iCloud storage plan amongst your family too. So you can not only do that for the first time, but then you see like how much storage everybody is using. It's just a great way to reveal some of those features and make them easier to use. And family sharing, I think, if you have a family and you're not using this feature please go use it. It really does simplify sharing and making purchases and all that stuff easier amongst a family group. So that's, I think, my surprise favorite.
I mean, that's so great to hear, because I know Apple's drawn a lot of fire for a long time, and notably from Adam and Tanya Engst, about the fact that the whole Apple experience was a little bit more of a solo experience, and so they needed to improve the family stuff. And it may be a long time coming, but if it's here and it works as well as you indicate, that's great. Yeah. That's great.
It's very convenient. It's very convenient. I hope that they will continue to improve those features, because it really does make it easier to, just like having a shared calendar was so hard for so long, and you had to do it using Google. Well, now just simplifying that as they have over these past few versions, I think it's going to make things a lot easier for people.
So we alluded to it at the beginning here that this is one of the early versions of the book, and I'm going to ask you to just give us a quick walkthrough of that. I know Joe did before when he was on, but for the people that didn't listen to his review and are listening to this, you can buy the book now, but it's not completely finished. It will be finished once the High Sierra actually ships.
So we finally do have a ship date now, which is September 25th, so Monday after next, which is great, because now we know that soon you will have access to the final version of the book. The book that you can buy right now is the early access edition. So it has everything that we had to that point, which in this case was a lot. There were 3 or 4 chapters that I didn't want to finish, especially the one about troubleshooting. I wasn't sure if there were going to be new problems. And there actually are. There's a list of High Sierra specific issues. They're not exactly problems, but things people will want to know about that are different. And so the final version will have all the content, all of those additional chapters, everything updated if anything changed between the version of the beta we were using and the final version, and the new things that I found in the past few weeks. So there are new tips as well. But it is an automatic upgrade. So if you buy the early access, you get it now, but then the 1.1 version will come out to you. So yeah, we thought that was a great idea, because so many people use the public beta now. And it seems like it was. A lot of people have gotten the early access version and are using it to explore High Sierra early. So
this probably shouldn't be part of the interview, but I'll make it one anyway. Do you find the public beta thing a good idea, you think?
Well, I think that it is. I think it is, because I think it's a lot better for Apple. When you sign up for the public beta, you have a little app that appears. It's where you give feedback, because that's the point. They want the feedback. I think that I don't think it's as obvious to us now, because it's so easy to get updates of the software when there are bugs, because they can update them so invisibly. But having that public beta time, I'm sure it's got to really reduce the incidences of major problems, because if there's something major, beta testers are screaming about it. And and the people who are going to beta test are the people, one would assume, who are into that, like who it's going to be fun to find problems and, explore and check out the new stuff, get a peek behind the curtain. So I think it's a good idea. Yeah. But if you don't want anything to go wrong on your computer, don't download public beta software on your main computer.
Yeah, and I guess that's my thing. I usually, if I sit down to do something at the computer at this point, I don't want to have the possibility of it breaking.
You want to do it.
I need to get it done. So if I have time to play, sure, absolutely. I mean, we've all done that. We've all played with somebody's beta software, no question about it. But there's something about an OS beta that just feels a little more dangerous.
It's a little more serious. It is.
Yeah.
And this time was the first time that I did, against all caution, put it on my major machine, because I grow tired of going. I have a laptop, my kid's laptop, that I used to see what was it like in the last version. And the reason that I feel confident doing that now is because all of my files are in the cloud. I will say, back to the cloud part of this conversation, I know I'm not going to lose any files. So that makes me feel a lot more confident to get in there. And of course, it's a good thing for me to discover if there's something wrong, because then I can warn readers about it. So, yeah.
Good. Pricing. We didn't touch that, I don't think.
It is $15, and it's available on TakeControlBooks.com.
Absolutely. Shali, it's so good to see you, fireside chat and all. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the work I know you've put into this book to make life a little bit easier for the rest of us. We do appreciate it. We do appreciate it.
Well,
and we gotta
thank
get
you for having me.
Yeah, we got to get you back on more often when we're not just talking about a Take Control book. So I'll pester you. I'll pester you.
All right. Thank you, Chuck.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. If you are ready to upgrade to High Sierra or are thinking about it, this may be the way to ease into it. But definitely, if you want to take advantage of all the new features of High Sierra, Shali's got the book for you. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes, links to subscribe, and to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, SoundCloud, the MacVoices blog, the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter, and on MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard that helps you do more with your Apple tech. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com, bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.